In this tutorial, the dubstep bass, we are making sounds like this. What's up guys, as you just heard, we are going to be making this really thick, juicy, kind of wonky, rhythmish style dubstep bass in Serum. But before I go into the Serum patch, I'm just going to turn off the mastering and turn off the external sub so we hear just the dry Serum. Now I say this Serum is dry, but there are actually a lot of effects. So for right now, I'm just going to turn off the effects individually so I can take you through the Serum patch. Now this is what the patch sounds like without any post-processing, any effects in post at all. So as you can hear, it is pretty much the same sound. There really isn't much that's changed, except in the post-processing, it's just there to make it really fat and really thick. There's no like actual processing of the sound that drastically changes the sound's tone. So to start off, I'm just using two oscillators here, oscillator A and the noise, but the noise is very simple. I'll get to that in a second. But what I'm doing for oscillator A is I'm using a custom wavetable to start off. Now, if you want to know how I made this wavetable, then you can go check out AU5's video about he did this video about detuned square kind of growly wavetables, and they sound really good, and I made quite a few. I'll link the video in the description, if like at the bottom of the description, if you just want to go and check it out. You can make these wavetables yourself, but I am going to provide the link to this specific preset in the description as well, so you can go and download that if you want this specific wavetable. But if you want to hear the wavetable just by itself, how it sounds just by itself, I have it in an external Serum here. It's really wonky, it sounds really interesting, and I really like using these wavetables for sound design because you can get a lot of really cool, unique tones out of them. And every time you make a wavetable like this, it comes out different every time. That's why I've made so many of them. But this is just the first one I've ever made. This is just the super square one, and I dropped it down a couple octaves. And what I'm doing here, I am modulating both the wavetable position and the mirror warp mode here with LFO1, which is just doing this upward shape. I just wanted this upward movement. With these things, it'll be different for each wavetable. Like if you don't have this exact wavetable, it's going to be different for every one. I just found a couple spots. You can see basically where they are. You can mess around. Basically, if you move these around, you could get really cool effects also. You just won't get exactly the tone that I have, you know? Also, I do have some modulation on the level, which is going to be, this is what people will call the main modulation. This is the modulation of the volume, and most of the talking is going to happen through this one. Also, both of these are on 1/4 in trigger. That's really all you need to know for this. They're both pretty simple. But yeah, I have the volume going up 75, 0 to normal, and then I also added 4 voices of detune, as well as turning down the phase randomness so we get that kind of weird rhythm spreading out, kind of wonky sound that's very common in today's dubstep music. But already we have a sound that's pretty close to what we want. That's already very close. Now, of course, we do have some pitch bend with LFO3 here. I know it looks like a very weird shape, and it is a weird shape, especially for a pitch bend, but with the song that I'm working in, I actually had to pitch this sound down lower, like playing it on lower notes than the actual fundamental of the song was in the key of the song. So I pitched it up at the end there. It was just weird. This is just specific to my song, but all it is that a little pitch bend's going down. And that's the only thing that LFO3 is controlling. You know, LFO3 goes directly to the master tune, and I have it up just 6, and it's just doing some weird bendy motion. If it didn't have the bendy motion, it would still sound pretty cool. It would just have more tonality to it, you know? You can hear the note versus just hearing it slide around. Alright, next up, just go ahead and add a little bit of bright noise. We don't need much to this at all. It really doesn't need a lot of noise. Just with LFO2, we're going to bump it up 20%, and it's not going to go through the filter, so we're not going to get the dry. That's why it's up as high as it is, but this is just going to be a subtle layer. Right now it's pretty obvious, but like I said, it'll disappear later on in the chain. After that, let's go ahead and flip on the filter. Of course, we're using the ever popular high notch 12. You hear that a lot in dubstep these days. And just A is going through it. We're not routing the noise through it. But what we're doing here is we're using the cutoff, modulating up with LFO2 right here, the main modulation, to create that vowel sound. It's got quite a bit of resonance, so we're getting quite a peak there in the high pass filter. And then we're using the frequency to go down, let's see, yeah, with LFO1 right here, this is going down pretty far actually. Normally I'd only bring it to about the middle, but it's going from like 82 down 59, almost 60. So we're doing a big sweep with this notch filter here, and that's going to give a lot of kind of phasey quality, a lot of weird motion of performance. Especially going with that down pitch, it's really going to kind of follow the harmonics down. It's going to it creates a pretty neat effect. We're also going to bump the drive up like 30% or so. And again, this is going to boost oscillator A's volume over the noise, so the noise is not quite as loud anymore. You can hear that. So after that, that's really all we have for this section. We can just pop right into the effects section. So first off, we're going to add distortion, just full soft clipping. That's all I did. Nothing complicated at all. But it already adds so much to the sound, like just a little bit of saturation with the soft clip really goes a long way. I say a little bit of saturation when I'm clearly just driving it all the way. After that, flip on the hyper dimension, and we're just going to do basic stuff with the hyper dimension here. Just turn the mix up a little bit on the hyper. I didn't change any of the other settings. And then for the dimension, size all the way down, mix up a good bit, around 30% or so, and that's just going to get your basic, you know, extra stereo expansion that the hyper dimension is good for. Oh yeah, I totally forgot I had the other version. Let me just go ahead and turn that off so we aren't confused. I'll get to that part later. For the next effect, I have a flanger, and all I did was I turned the mix down to like anywhere between like 40 or something percent. Just anywhere around there is really, really nice to have the flanger constantly moving in the background. It creates a slightly different sound every time you hit a note, even though you don't notice it. I think it's pretty apparent when it's gone, when things like this are gone, because in the note is very, very static and it doesn't sound very natural. So I like to keep the flanger on there. Next up, you can turn on the phaser, and what we're going to do here is we're going to create the little guitar amp effect, and what's going to happen is we're going to turn down the rate, depth, and the frequency all to 0, and we're just going to mix it in. I have it a little over 50%, about 60% or so, and this all the way up is a very harsh effect. It just boosts some frequencies in the mid-range and kind of cuts out some very high frequencies and low frequencies. It just has a cool curve that reminds me of a guitar amp, and just mixing it in, it adds a very nice layer. After that, we're going to put on a filter, and this is basically the same filter as in this section, except you don't get a visual. It does kind of roll off the very high end a little bit, I've noticed, but maybe they'll fix that in an update, I don't know. But what we're going to do here is just select the low 12 filter under the normal section, and we're going to be modulating it with LFO2 here, because I noticed it lost a lot of its kind of a lot of its tightness, adding the rest of these effects and stuff like that. It has a nice long tail to it, but I didn't really like the tail. I wanted it to be a little tighter, and this kind of achieves that. It's like, you can already hear with the low pass filters taking care of a lot of the high end that's kind of ringing out, and modulating the cutoff a lot here. It's bipolar, by the way, which means if you get something like this, all you have to do is go Shift, Alt, and click to make it bipolar, going both directions. No resonance, no drive, no fat, nothing like that, but I am mixing it in as well. I have the mix up all the way, but it's modulating down like 25% with LFO2 here, so we don't always get the full amplitude of the mix. And when, like I said, it kind of rolls off the high end, I wanted to kind of combat that by not mixing it in all the way, and then the multiband compression will do the rest. Speaking of multiband compression, that is our next component in this chain. What we're going to do is flip on the compressor, make sure multiband is selected, and then we're just going to crank the threshold down to like -7. I really like using the threshold. Most people use the gain, but I like using the threshold. I do not believe we are changing any of these bands. Nope, they're all the same. This is just going to really crank it, especially after the filter. Now we're bringing some of that lost high end back, and we're making it more powerful after the kind of weakness that the filter added. So that's very important in pretty much any Serum based preset nowadays. They'll all have the multiband compression on. After that, we can flip on a chorus, and what I have right here is my basic chorus preset, very low rate, low delays as well, brought the depth down a bit, and also the high pass filter is engaged just a little bit. That doesn't really make much difference. But this is going to add this effect right here. Just this really tight spread of chorus. And I just turned it down to literally anywhere in here should be fine as well. This just adds more width and a little more dimension, along with all of the the harsh other effects that we've added. It just makes it nice and clean and smooth again. We're getting close to the end of Serum here. Right now we're just going to add in the EQ, which I am using as another filter, which is doing almost the same thing as this high pass notch filter is doing here. It's just not quite as strong. Have the high pass filter going back and forth with this left side here. You can see it's on the kind of passing filter type. And then I have a peak on this side, which is going back and forth. It's doing what I would normally do with this kind of filter. It's just going in kind of towards the middle and then coming back around to create a more vowel-y sound. I made sure not to bring the gain down too low though, because I didn't want it cutting out too much. I just wanted the suggestion of an extra filter, which is what this EQ is really, really good for. And after that, the last thing in Serum is just a delay, and I'm doing a very metallic delay thing here. This is commonly done in RIDDIM, but if you bring the feedback up a little over 50%, make sure that both the left and the right are linked. I have them on very high values. This is 1 to 128, but you could go to other things if it worked for you. And on ping pong, we get this effect. That really spread out metallic effect. I didn't want that all the way, of course, it's very strong. I wanted to mix it in, and I'm mixing it in with LFO1 here. It's starting out with no delay, and then as the sound rises up, it gets more delay. You can see the delay pops up, so we have more of a metallic delay at the end of the sound than we do at the beginning. There's like none at the beginning. And that just, again, that's very subtle, just adds a very nice layer, especially going into compression later on. But that is all we need to do for the Serum preset itself. Let's go into the mixer and see where it is routed. So first up, we have this EQ. This is a very harsh EQ. We're cutting all the sub that was outputted by Serum, and we're boosting a lot of the high end. That's some very, very harsh high end right there, but this sound was lacking a lot of high end, and I needed to bring it back like really early in the chain before I compressed things. So that's what this EQ is for. After that, we have the OTT, of course, everybody uses it. And it just does its job, man. I just turned the depth down a little bit and made sure the time was up a lot. If the time is not up, it usually sounds like this. I didn't want it holding that tail in. I wanted it to have more of a release. So I just turned the time up and it took care of that nasty tail. After that, we can throw on a Serum FX. And what I'm doing here is just a couple of effects. I'm adding downsampling and more multiband compression. For the downsampling, what I did here, you can see I just have a very, very tight drive here. There's not a lot of drive at all. And the mix is up all the way, but this really small amount of drive and downsampling is just gonna add a little bit of high-end kind of ringing. It's very hard to hear, but versus this, there's just a little bit on the high end that I really wanted to bring out a little more in the downsample, especially when we add more multi-band compression. You can see we're just cranking it, you know, even harder. I brought these bands up a little bit as well. We get this. So now it's much stronger than it was before, you know, just without any of the effects. And the rest of the effects are pretty much going to be finishing up this sound and getting them ready to be put into my mix. Now the rest of the sounds in my mix in this song were very, very strong, so this sound I need to be even stronger after this compression. What I did was I opened up Patcher and I pulled up my little cheesy fat rack. This isn't anything complicated at all. This is just a super simple rack that I like to put on my basses. It works on almost everything. Makes it really, really loud and powerful. I have a Maximus here that's just splitting up per band. I have the high end soloed for this Maximus. I have the mid-range soloed for this Maximus and the low end soloed for this Maximus. I could use an EQ for that, but I like using Maximus because it had a very even kind of spacing of the bands. And then I am putting 6 soft clippers, 2 on each line, and I am just cranking it in this format. I just create this shape. It's just a very harsh curve, or excuse me, the effect is harsh, but the curve is actually very soft. It's when you use 6 of them that you really get to hear the effect that it has, and it sounds really good. Really, really strong and powerful. Then for the last couple effects, I just have an EQ to make sure it sounds clean. Meaning cutting out all the low end, cutting some weird frequencies and making sure it doesn't sound too harsh. And then I have a final wave shaper, which is literally just sitting here. Like I did absolutely nothing. I just wanted the wave shaper to keep it from clipping, because you can't see it up here, but what it actually looks like if this were to continue upward is it looks like this. it has a hard clip up at this top area. Nothing will go above 0 dB without it clipping. This will stop it, keep it from clipping as a hard clip. So I didn't want any weird peaks in the spectrum. I just wanted it to stay relatively flat. And you can see it doesn't go over 0 dB on the mixer. It just stops there without the wave shaper. It's doing a little bit of clipping. I just wanted to chop off the very top and make sure it was contained. Then of course we can add a sub on top of that. So that is how I made the sound. Now if you want to know how to do this little fast sound right here, I will show you. It's pretty much, it's the same patch, like everything is the same, except I made some changes to the automation here. What I did for LFO1 is I created this shape instead of just rising up. I made it do a weird pattern, and you can hear when I'm clicking around, like this is on off, it's not on trigger. You can hear when I'm clicking around, it changes every single time. This is constantly moving. So that allows me to click down multiple times. Like if I click twice as fast as this LFO was going, I will get both sides of this LFO, And that's what allows me to add that double hit and make it go flub flub, because it is on off. So it's not re-triggering every time I hit a note. Also for LFO2, I just made this main automation shorter. And that's literally all I did. I think, yeah, for LFO3, I added a little bit of a rise up on trigger, but that doesn't add that much of an effect. That just keeps it wonky and keeps it kind of, not confined to one note. It keeps it sliding around and not sounding tonal. It keeps it atonal. That's the word I was looking for. And then we add the glorious sub bass. Alright, and there we have every single bit of the sound. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far in the video, then you are officially my favorite person ever, and you are a miracle of YouTube. Now it's time for my end of the video plugs, meaning me. Nobody sponsors me. If you are interested in private Skype lessons, there is a link in the top of the description where you can go and see details about that. They're not very expensive compared to other people, trust me. Also, if you would like to listen to my music, I am on most every platform that normal human beings listen to. Links to all those are in the description as well. So thank you all for the support you give me. I really appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next video.